Hello and welcome to another standard video. Today we're checking out this black, red and green or Jund colored artifact sacrifice deck, which features 4 copies of the new Biotech specialist as voted on by my supporters on Patreon. A 2 mana 1/3. When it enters, it creates a lander token, which is an artifact token we can sacrifice for 2 mana to essentially rampant growth, find a basic land to put on the battlefield tapped, and whenever we sacrifice an artifact with a specialist in play, it deals 2 damage to target opponent, so sacrificing a lander can net us 2 damage, and this deck is filled with other artifacts that we can sacrifice to hopefully get the most out of our specialist. And then another card we're building around in this deck, also from Edge of Eternities, is Weapons Manufacturing, a 2 mana enchantment saying whenever a non-token artifact we control enters, so we get to make one of these munitions tokens, which does not have a way to sacrifice itself, but if it were to leave the battlefield, it deals 2 damage to any target, so it can also target opposing creatures if necessary. So all we need now is to have lots of cheap artifacts to generate those munitions, and then a sacrifice outlet to be able to sacrifice those munitions reliably so we can deal a ton of damage. And if we also control the specialist, every munitions that gets sacrificed can also deal 2 damage to the opponent directly, so that can add up pretty quickly. And one way we have of sacrificing a bunch of random artifact tokens is using the Rottenmouth Viper, which is 6 mana 6/6, but as an additional cost to cast it, we may sacrifice any number of non-land permanents, and then it gets a 1 mana discount for each permanent sacrificed this way. So we can pretty reliably cast the Viper for just a single black mana in this deck, sacrificing 5 non-land permanents, including perhaps those munitions tokens, and then when the Viper enters or attacks, it can also force the opponent to lose life, discard cards, or maybe sacrifice a non-land permanent, so that can also get out of hand pretty quickly, assuming the Viper survives. Usually it does get taken out. And then besides the Viper, we also have 2 copies of the Umbral Color Zealot from Edge of Eternities, a 3/2 that can sacrifice another creature or artifact at will in order to surveil one. So the card selection is nice, but we're mainly playing it as a way to sacrifice a bunch of munitions to hopefully burn the opponent out. And then we can also sacrifice stuff using the Legion Extruder, a 2 mana artifact that comes down dealing 2 damage to any target, and then we can pay 2 mana, tap it, sacrifice another artifact to make a 3/3 Golem token, so that can also be a solid backup win condition, just making a bunch of 3/3s, but that's another great way to sack tokens from the manufacturing, and it also triggers the manufacturing to begin with. And then we also have 2 copies of Fanatical Offering, which is also a very nice fit in this strategy as an instant that can sacrifice either a creature or an artifact as an additional cost to draw 2 cards and create a map token, which is another cheap artifact token we can sacrifice for 1 mana to help us explore. And then our final sacrifice outlet is Embrace Oblivion, which is a 1 mana sorcery. As an additional cost, we have to sacrifice an artifact or creature to destroy a creature or spacecraft. Not that there's many of those in Standard, but just a cheap way to take care of larger threats that we're maybe unable to answer using the Extruder. There's Grim Bauble, which we'll get to in a second, and the 2 damage from the munitions may also not be enough to take care of larger threats, so it's good to have a few copies of Embrace Oblivion to take care of those bigger problems. So those are all ways we have of sacrificing those munitions, and then the rest of our deck is mainly just cheap artifacts to round out the deck. At 1 mana we're also playing the full set of Nutrient Block, which is an indestructible food, so as any food can be sacrificed for 2 mana to gain 3 life, and when this artifact is put into the graveyard from the battlefield, we also draw a card, so if we sacrifice it to one of our many effects, we still get a card in return, so that also feels pretty good. And as an indestructible artifact, we can also maybe animate it using our Tough Cookie, which is a 2/2 food golem, so it can also be sacrificed for 3 life, and when it enters it makes a food token, so that's 2 permanents for 2 mana. That also fits perfectly into this strategy, and the cookie also has an activated ability for 3 mana, turning one of our artifacts into a 4/4 until end of turn, so with the Nutrient Block we can make an indestructible 4/4 temporarily to either attack or block with. And then at 1 mana we also have the full set of Edge Rover, a 2/2 with a reach, and when it dies each player creates a lander token, so the opponent also gets one, but we usually don't mind getting another artifact in return if we sack the Rover to one of our many effects, and then the lander can still provide additional value. The Percussionist is another 1 mana artifact creature, this time a 1/1 with haste, and when it dies we get to exile the top card and play it until the end of our next turn, so another artifact that we don't mind sacrificing. And then last but not least, 2 2 copies of a Grim Bauble, gives a creature -2/-2 when it enters, and then can also be sacrificed for 3 mana to Surveil 2, but usually we'll be sacrificing it to our other effects. And then the mana base could be configured in a number of ways. We definitely want at least one of each basic to find with our lander tokens if we do decide to sacrifice those. And then it makes sense to go with the Verge lands plus kind of dual land approach, which means Stomping Ground currently the only shock land we have available in Standard, still missing Blood Crypt and Overgrown Tomb. So we're rounding things out with the Mortuary, which surveils 1 when it enters, but it does enter tapped. Same with the Theater. And then all these shock lands and basics are perfect for enabling the various Verge lands, so those can also reliably make both colors. But it does mean that we have to play some of these tap lands. Sometimes we will draw multiple Verge lands, which means we might be missing out on a color, so things aren't perfect. Could potentially experiment with Starting Town as a land that enters untapped early and can produce all colors, but it is also going to be quite painful, especially when you look at some of our mana requirements. We need single green, single red, single black, red and green, so we're constantly going to be tapping the Starting Town for colored mana, so that's a lot of life we're losing to it as well, which can also cost us in close aggro matchups. But yeah, for now, let's jump into some games and see how the deck does. Okay, we're on the draw with a keepable hand. We've got some cheap permanents, we've got a Viper. Opponent might have a Duress. Yeah, Viper usually doesn't stick around long against black removal. At its best against red, green, sometimes blue decks if they can't easily bounce or counter it. But black and white usually have plenty of answers. Alright, opponent's got a Cecil turn 1, so Percussionist is not attacking into it. I think I still play it since red mana could be a limiting factor, whereas Nutrient Block is not going to be a real bottleneck, can always play it for 1 mana. So yeah, just want to efficiently deploy as many permanents as possible. And are confident, can draw them more cards. Probably worth taking out with the Extruder. Can offer the trade first, I suppose. Do have to be careful not to attack the opponent too much and make it easier to transform Cecil. So yeah, I'm drawing one of our shock lands or just basics would help in deploying my hand efficiently. Embrace Oblivion can answer Cecil. Yeah, I guess I can Embrace Oblivion Cecil now. Maybe sacking Percussionists, which can maybe still hit my land drop. Alright, so I guess that still kind of worked out. A Legion Extruder making 3/3s can help block the color, so that's not a huge concern. But yeah, still don't have any green mana, so I might struggle to get the Viper down without sacking the Extruder, which is something I would prefer to keep in play. This makes a red mana. But now I can go Percussionist. I guess I would still have to sack the Extruder. Yeah, it's probably necessary. I would get to draw off Nutrient Block as well, so that can maybe find green mana. If our opponent tries to take out the Percussionist, I just sack it to the Extruder. So I could also set that up. And wait for the opponent to attack, so they have to waste instant speed removal. And then get an extra card of Percussionist. Another Edge Rover that I currently cannot cast. And then I believe they'll have an answer for the 3/3. Shoot the Sheriff also could have answered the Viper, to be fair. Alright, there we go. Finally. Play Edge Rover. Play Viper, sacking everything except Extruder. Opponent does get to sack their lander token. And a bauble could also answer the color temporarily. And of course, discarding a swamp makes sense when we just gave them a lander. Do you have a removal spell left as your last card? Don't get to find out yet. So 2 unknowns in hand, 6 mana available. And a Betrayal is pretty effective, exiling our only creature, so sadly didn't have an extra in play to protect it. Now, bauble the color. Definitely interested in activating the Extruder. Could still play Tough Cookie alongside it, so next turn I can start activating it. But not too interested in shocking myself to keep up the 3 mana ability. Opponent's holding priority, so possible they have more removal for the cookie itself, which I would then be able to extrude. And then the food token's probably more valuable than the lander at the moment. Yeah, it's pretty obvious that our opponent does have removal, but they don't want to play into the Legion Extruder. Alright, Preacher, also a good leftover. So if they attack, I can extrude, let's say, the lander or the Grim Bauble. Don't think I need to surveil 2 all that badly. And it's cheaper to sack the lander in future turns in case we find a Biotech Specialist, for instance. Block the color, make them use removal on the 3/3. I'm okay taking 2. And now Tough Cookie can also make 4/4s to help block the Preacher. There's a Specialist, so I can empty my hands. And then happy to trade a random artifact for Preacher. And then we should be pretty close to burning them out. If they just pass, end of turn, sack a lander. Another Cecil, that one's kind of scary. Since that could turn into a 4/4 indestructible, a lifelinker. I guess only author attacking creatures gain indestructible. Preacher attacks and gets to draw. Okay, so yeah, opponent's at 10, so Cecil would transform, but not until it deals damage. Can I deal 10 damage right now? I doubt it. If I animate Tough Cookie, they probably just jump with a color. But I guess that's maybe worth it. Could activate twice. Then yeah, our opponent still has reasonable blocks. So I'll just send in the 1/4/4. Want to at least be in a position where we can threaten lethal if they take another 2 from Cecil's ability. So do I take 2 myself? Feels a little sketchy. But maybe it's worth it, since it allows me to use Extruder and sack either food or lander token. So yeah, pretty suspenseful turn. Bloodletter, ooh. That one is scary. Okay. Do have Rover with Reach. Can maybe jump it once. Cecil attacks. So I can still trade for my 3/3. Opponent's got to know where to run. Okay. Probably going for the 3/3. So now can I deal 8 damage? Sacrifice food is 2. Sacrifice rover to extruder is 4. I get a lander, which is 6. And then tough cookie is 8. And I should have the mana to do all of that. 2 for extruder, 2 for lander, 2 for cookie. So yeah, that's fine. I guess I do need to maybe jump with a cookie now. Sack this now, as opposed to the food token. Could have also looked into activating cookie to attack with a 4/4, but this should do it. Could also attack first, I suppose, which gets in 1 extra damage. But yeah, we're dealing damage in multiples of 2, so it doesn't really matter. Alright, damage happens. Sack rover. And that's 2 damage. And then either food or lander can do the honors. Alright, definitely a close one here, but we got it done. On to the next one. Okay, we're on the draw. This hand is all 1-drops with no real payoff, no sacrifice outlet, no Viper or manufacturing even. So I don't think I can keep, also missing a color. This is a bit better. We can go turn to manufacturing and then unload some artifacts. Could be nice to have a removal spell. Nutrient block we can always use as a cantrip. So maybe I prioritize just enacting my own plan. Because Bobble's not always great if we're up against a control deck. Would have been pretty good against a red aggro, but there's another one. So question now, do we play a 1-drop or do we play manufacturing before unloading all our artifacts? I should probably just Bobble the Hard Claw. Because Edge Rover also would not be able to block it since it can attack, trigger Hard Claw, and then threaten to make it a 2/3. So that wouldn't really work. Opponent is red-white. Headliner's next, and there's a Viper, perfect. So this could be the matchup where Viper gets to shine. Unless they've got some removal like Get Lost that can still hit a 6/6. Alright, so it's more of a token aggro deck. So yeah, they are curving out nicely. A land is good, so now we should be able to play the Viper. Nutrient block into Edge Rover, triggering manufacturing each time. And then I can Viper. Could also wait a turn to play Specialist first, so we sack a bunch of artifacts with Specialist on the battlefield. Is that greedy? Because I could get the Viper going in the meantime. So I think I still prioritize it here. And then we can keep the manufacturing on the battlefield. Take out Headliner, seems worth it. Okay, not bad. So if they cannot answer the Viper, that's gonna take over very quickly. If they do have removal, we still have a backup plan with a Specialist. But yeah, opponent forced to pass. So could play Specialist first, don't know if it matters. And go ahead and attack. And get a second Blight counter. Discard a land, take 4, and then another 6. So we can put him to 2 by sacking a lander, and then next turn hopefully get the job done. Flanker can maybe gain them some life. I'm okay jumping with a Specialist if we're at risk of dying, since we have another one. But yeah, opponent had a totally functional draw here. Hard Claw, Headliner, War Leader's Call. Maybe not the best follow-up to the War Leader's Call. Okay, Sheltered by Ghosts could still maybe turn the game around. So that's the type of cards that they needed. So now I regret not just playing another specialist first. Opponent gets to gain 5. Although if we can generate another munitions and sacrifice it, that's also an answer to the flanker. But yeah, Sheltered by Ghost, one of those high variance cards that can definitely swing a game around. Probably the reason why they didn't have the best play on turn 4, because they were maybe lacking a creature to enchant. But yeah, we'll see what happens here. Can play Specialist. And then at the very least sack 2 landers, which would deal 4 damage each, putting my opponent to 1. So I guess if Specialist connects, we have lethal. If they can flash in a blocker, then things get awkward, because then flanker gets to hit us back. But it might be worth it. Opponent falls to 8, so now 2 landers are lethal. 4 damage each. Alright, so Sheltered by Ghosts still kept us in a bit of suspense, but we got there. On to the next one. Okay, we're on the draw. Hand is functional, just missing a good sacrifice outlet pretty much. So we're looking for Viper or Zealot. Opponent on a white life gain deck. Could still be black-white bats as well. Now I guess I could play Rover turn 1 since it blocks the Rune Lurker so they don't get a free attack, which could matter if they play a turn 2 Pridemate or the other bat that picks up +1 counters when you gain life. Opponent's gonna immediately Sheltered by Ghosts. Also would have been a good answer to the manufacturing. Okay, there's another Rover. So maybe I do wait on manufacturing a bit longer, go Rover tap land. Does mean I miss out on some munitions, but maybe it is worth it here. And then lands could be fine, but I really need to find a sack outlet for these munitions. And there's a Pridemate we were talking about. But yeah, a reach is a thing. Opponent doesn't seem to be missing that fact. So now manufacturing into Percussionist. Exemplar's a good one too. So now our opponent feels comfortable setting up the trade as they'll draw a card. Could also trade for the Pridemate, to be fair. Although, if I block with Rover, we'll get our Rover back, and then next turn I could still maybe double block the Pridemates. We get a lander and a munitions, since manufacturing happens on ETB and not on cast. So, might have to Fanatical Offering. If I sack a munitions, I get to deal 2 damage and instant speed. So that can also maybe catch the opponent off guard, but then I'm not hitting my land drop here is the problem. But maybe that's worth it to try and set up an ambush. If our opponent can gain life before attacking, then it's not quite gonna pan out. But I can always sack a lander here as a backup plan, in case the ambush doesn't work. Another Pridemate we can also shoot for 2 damage. And yeah, now Vanguard is a problem, because that's going to grow everything including the Exemplar, so we can't really ambush it anymore. Or I can Fanatical Offering, shoot the Vanguard, and then they don't gain life to begin with. Yeah, that's probably better. And then I could still double block the 3/3 Pridemates. And they also don't get to draw the Exemplar. Extruder is a sack outlet, but a pretty slow one. So maybe not what we need right now. Opponent is not going to trade off Pridemate, or... yeah, they are. So we'll accept. But now with Extruder, I can play it and sack munitions to deal 4 to the Exemplar. So that's still a good turn. Bobble also useful. And the Healer's Hawk. So with a bauble now, I guess I could just play Extruder, bauble, take care of Exemplar. Or we can take care of Healer's Hawk and Pride Mates. But then I guess I'm not going to be able to deal with the Exemplar going forward. So, yeah, let's just go bauble, Exemplar, and Extruder it. And then we can still manage a 3-3 Pride Mate if Healer's Hawk gets in for one. So we've got a million artifacts, just missing a better sack outlet. But for now, I still feel pretty comfortable with the Extruder making 3-3s. So we can play Specialists. And pass a turn. Opponent's gonna ramp. Would love to be able to do the same, so we have more mana to be able to sack more things. Sacking Nutrient Block to the Extruder would draw a card, so that's also worth considering, but of course we need to sack munitions to deal damage. So that's the priority. So they're thinning out the deck a bit. So we can shoot the Healer's Hawk by sacking munitions, block Pride Mate with a 3-3. And Banishing Lights probably goes for the Extruder. Goes for Specialist. Alright, I mean, I'm gonna go for it now to get 2 extra damage. Shoot the Hawk. And then hopefully they can't gain any life. They don't. And another manufacturing could be overkill. So what's my priority? I guess looking for a sack outlet. This turn I could maybe sack the Nutrient Block to draw. Could do that main phase. Since there's no small creature I necessarily need to take out, since Vanguard wouldn't trigger since they only have 1 creature in play. Drew a land, that's good. Could still sack a map, or I can keep my life total a bit higher. And for now just play a tough cookie. I've got plenty of munitions already. Do we attack for 3? Maybe I'll wait one more turn, because if they do have removal for my Golem, I want to be able to still block the Pride Mate. And our opponent scoops it up. Yeah, they're pretty far behind here. There's a ton of things we can sacrifice, and sooner or later we're going to find either Viper, Zealot, or some other way to speed up the process. On to the next one. Okay, we're on the draw. Our hand's not perfect. Double Viper is a bit redundant. We need more cheap permanents to sacrifice. But Rover and Nutrient Block help, so then if we just pick up one more cheap artifact, we should be alright. Play Rover. Even if they remove it, we'll get another permanent, but yeah, drawing 2 lands in a row is not ideal. Put on some sort of Jeskai deck, so it could be control. Alright, there's a Specialist. Get in for 2. So next turn we can play a pretty cheap Viper, maybe after attacking. Archive turns on their other lands, so now they could have additional interaction, but our opponent taps out for stock up. So they'd likely have a board wipe to stabilize next turn, so we just need to make the most out of it. So start by attacking. And then Viper, I can just sacrifice, let's say, the Lander and the Rover. Keep Nutrient Block as something I can animate with Tough Cookie as well. Seems reasonable. And then we trigger Specialist twice. So it's not too difficult to set up another Viper, even if there is a board wipe. Ultima, destroys our lander as well. Luckily, Nutrient Block is indestructible. So now we can play Tough Cookie, animate the block. HF for 4. And we can potentially run it back. Opponent looking at the graveyard, maybe they've got a dragon to get a spell back. It would just be stock up. So then they would die to an untapped land, since I can activate Tough Cookie twice. So opponent decides to just stock up instead, to try and find removal for Tough Cookie, presumably. Next turn at 7 mana they could have Jeskai Revelation, which is a pretty good way to stabilize. So if possible, we want to present lethal here. Opponent passes, and Biotech Specialist isn't bad, since that can also represent additional damage. So let's say Tough Cookie activates on Nutrient Block, and I attack. Is there anything that can remove the block? Maybe a bounce spell? Or they could have like a Lightning Helix, deal 3, gain 3. Would also make sense. Maybe they've got exile a tapped creature, which would deal with a block. So there's a lot to consider. I think it's still worth it to try and activate. Go to attackers. Just a get lost on the cookie, that's fine. So opponent still takes 4. So if I play Specialist and immediately sack a food or a lander, we have lethal. Don't quite have the mana to sack a map. So what if I play Viper? I guess I could still work. I have to sacrifice all 4, but playing Specialists, unless they remove it in response to the trigger, I could still deal 2 damage. And then now they've got another threat they need to deal with. Could also play Cookie first, so we already have a food in play by the time Specialist enters the battlefield. Because yeah, our opponent could technically remove it before we get the lander token in response to the triggered ability. And then we would not get a chance to deal 2 damage. Opponent discards a card draw spell. And there's Shiko, which can get back Get Lost, which would also give us plenty of artifacts to sacrifice. But these I can only activate as a sorcery, although now with Fanatical Offering we can potentially sacrifice at instant speed. I guess I could still have the counter spell, counter unless we pay 4, which would counter Specialist since they control a dragon. So that would be unfortunate, but I think it's still worth a try. And they actually had it, that's unlucky. Alright, so now what? I can Fanatical Offering, sack a map, hope to hit a land drop. Playing Tough Cookie now or next turn doesn't really make a huge difference. So, yeah, opponent's hanging on at 1 life. They had the 1 answer they needed. So I can Tough Cookie, activate, maybe finish off Shiko with a Bauble. Or we can send in Percussionist to have 2 hasty threats. The problem there is if they have removal, then I don't finish off Shiko. But they could have another copy in hand for all we know. And they're only going to find more answers here. So it's kind of on us to get the game over with. Let the cookie resolve. Animate a map. And then I think it's attack, trying to use Bauble. If I bobble first, we don't lose our 4-4, but then if they have removal, they just use it on the 4-4 instead, and we waste a bobble. This is maybe weaker in the face of a counterspell. But again, they might have another Shiko in hand, so they maybe don't care. But now we have a Tough Cookie in play. Can activate it twice, potentially. And Percussionist is technically lethal as well. But yeah, a card like Jeskai Revelation can turn the game around pretty easily. Maybe should have been more patient with the Specialist and wait until we can pay for the Exhale, but then again, we also need the mana to sacrifice an artifact before they get a chance to remove it. Ultima, ouch, once again destroys all artifacts. Okay, so the only problem with Tough Cookie is that it doesn't give the creature haste. So I guess we start with Percussionist, see if that works. Opponent counters with 3 steps ahead, alright. So then Tough Cookie resolves, as well as Nutrient Block. Question is if I should keep the cookie for next turn. And for now just play the block and pass. Because if they just remove the cookie, we don't have anything left. If they have another counterspell, I can maybe still pay for it and activate. But of course a counterspell like 3 steps could still counter the cookie, and then I would have been better off playing it first. But yeah, for an artifact deck facing 2 copies of Ultima, we're still hanging in there. Opponent's seen a lot of extra cards. Casting 4 copies of Stock Up. I'll take another Biotech Specialist off the top. That would probably be the easiest way to end it. As our opponent surveils, keeps on top. Alright, so play Tough Cookie. Maybe playing land is worth it in case they have both No More Lies and another Exhale. And then maybe play the land now. Activate on the block, which no longer has Summoning Sickness, so that can get in for 4. Hope they can't exile it. A flanker to chump is acceptable. It's gonna gain 2 Scry 2, but they already kept on top. But one has to imagine that they have an answer for the cookie itself, so then we still need another threat. Shiko, get back. What's it gonna be? Rediscover. So our opponent's seen pretty much their entire deck by now. Cookie down with a Helix, so that'll gain him 3 life. Can't sack the cookie since it's still summoning sick. Yeah, so the game's slipping away. Last chance to top deck. Specialists would maybe still do it. Now we have to sack to draw. Cycle Offering. Should maybe play land first in case they have another Exhale, so I can pay for it. And Legion Extruder. Well, that can go upstairs. Can make a 3/3. Is that relevant enough? Or do I keep the map token for future sacrifice synergies? I guess I can always sack a 3/3 later. So yeah, Extruder also could have won us the game a while ago. Opponent rediscovers again. Says their deck 4 Stock Up for Rediscover. Looks like it. That's not what we needed, so yeah. I think the game's over now. Definitely a close one. Another flanker. So they're prepared for the graveyard decks. They probably have a hard counter in hand now, so Don't think we can top deck our way out of this. And they can also give their team double strike. But yeah, couple decisions that could have gone differently, which may or may not have worked out. Opponent helixes the token, can sack it in response to deny the life gain. But they still get double strike. Have to block, because this is lethal. And they might have another helix in hand. Yep, GG's. Alright, on to the next one. Okay, we're on the draw. Our hand is missing a color, but if we find that color, it's actually pretty good. So I'm gonna try it. And there we go. Actually gonna wait on Percussionist until after we play the Manufacturing. Opponent red-black, maybe a Reanimator deck. Yep. So not in a hurry to try and deal with the Faithful, but can maybe bobble it next turn if they're setting up the graveyard. I guess if I bobble I wouldn't be able to play the Viper is the only drawback. And yeah, opponent's got Sin in the graveyard. They could still have a Zombify in hand to bring it back. Now with the Verge I can Viper and bobble. So can go bobble, probably Edge over into Viper. Could have also considered attacking with Percussionist. If they block with Fear, I can finish it off with a bobble, but yeah, let's not assume that they automatically have Zombify in hand. So I will be forced to sack the Manufacturing itself as well. So I could maybe wait, play Percussionists, and then next turn I can play Specialists and then Viper, so we also sack all the munitions. And maybe with another 1-mana artifact we can actually just win the game dealing 20. Opponent stuck on 3 lands, also good reason not to sack the Edge Rover yet, since they would get a lander. So now I can play Specialists. Don't trust Auto Tapper. Play Viper. Sacking all the munitions, bobble, and probably the lander too. So that's 5. And yeah, our opponent concedes a bunch of Specialist triggers, Viper enters, which could be a double-edged sword against a Reanimator deck, but they already have a payoff in the graveyard they could reanimate. And then, yeah, we could still Oblivion, maybe clearing their only blocker to get in for the last points. On to the next one. Okay, we're on the play with a hand that's just missing black mana, but could be incredibly deadly with double Manufacturing and a Viper to sacrifice all those munitions. So I'm not gonna play my Percussionist turn 1, just so we can get more value from them. And there's our black mana. So yeah, against black, they usually don't have a lot of enchantment removal. So once they're on the battlefield, they should be safe. And color, so it is kind of a sacrifice deck. Don't mind seeing that. So Manufacturing into Percussionist can now hit for 1. And then next turn it should be trivial to get the Viper down. Blood Witch can maybe gain them some life back. They are mono-black, it seems, so we don't have to worry about Raise the Past bringing their creatures back. So yeah, can just empty my hand, Tough Cookie, Nutrient Block, Viper. Make sure the Auto Tapper leaves a black mana. Can never be too sure when the Viper's involved. Alright, so this is potentially 10 damage to the face. Could also sack the nutrient block if we want to draw, but it's also an indestructible 4/4 for Tough Cookie. So I'll just sack 5 munitions. Blood Witch can go. The rest can maybe go face. Or I can still take out the collar, since it can maybe chump a 4/4 going forward. So not a bad turn. I should have reordered those triggers, making sure to take out Blood Witch before we take out the collar. Now our opponent got to drain us for 1 for free. But yeah, we kind of changed our mind midway, which is never a good idea. Always good to formulate your entire game plan before acting. Opponent gets back the collar at the cost of 2 life. Maybe they can sack it to take out the Viper with the Oblivion. Yep, Embrace Oblivion, sack a creature. That's okay. And a freebooter. Okay, so next up, activate Tough Cookie. And then I might sacrifice the nutrient block just to draw. Freebooter chumps. Yeah, at this point we wouldn't mind another Viper. Or maybe an artifact and then another sacrifice outlet. Trajectory takes out the cookie. It's tapped, so I cannot sacrifice it. But we still have some food we can sacrifice to gain life. So we can buy ourselves more time. Conviction to draw 2, pretty decent. But yeah, I'm glad we can at least punish the life loss from Timeline Color, so they can't just willy-nilly keep getting them back. Flooding out a little bit, but now Specialists could be quite effective. Would have been even better with Viper still around, but I'll still take it. So now sacking the lander and the food is 4 damage, putting them to 2. So that should be game. Can go for it now. Alright, sweet. GG's, on to the next one. Okay, we're on the draw. We have a keepable hand. Could use something like the manufacturing to make munitions. So we have more things to sacrifice to both Viper and Zealot. For now, could play Rover turn 1, can maybe get an attack in. Might regret it if I draw the manufacturing, because then we could have gotten an extra munitions out of it. So this might be the Synthesizer Artifact deck, which is a pretty bad matchup, since they have the Star Cage, which can essentially exile our entire board. So then I'm hesitant to play Tough Cookie, could play the Zealots. Although Tough Cookie does speed up the process of playing the Viper. But yeah, if they're exiling my board, then I want to at least surveil. So could see the Simulacrum Synthesizer here, which is their primary win condition. But yeah, opponent plays a Star Cage like we suspected, so not what we wanted to see. Don't have a way to remove it, so may as well go surveilling. Another Zealot's not what we need. We need a way to produce lots of permanents. The lander token's also going to get exiled, so may as well sack that as well. Percussionist isn't the worst. So I could go Cookie plus Percussionists, and then maybe next turn play a Viper. assuming they don't have another Star Cage. But yeah, this is one of the main reasons why this is going to be a very hard matchup. Does not exile enchantments, so the manufacturing would have been safe. But once they get the Simulacrum Synthesizer going, our best hope is to just burn them out with munitions tokens. Specialist does help. Second attack for 3. Still a chance they have the Saw Blades, which can deal 5 to attacking creature, which would take out the Cookie. If I play Specialist, I could still play Viper if I sack Specialist itself, which may or may not be worth it. I think I do attack since 3 damage could matter. Hope they don't have the Saw Blades. Yeah, they've got the Saw Blades. Goes for Cookie. But maybe this is actually a blessing in disguise, since we can maybe wait a little bit longer on playing the Viper and keep the Specialist around. Definitely don't need a third one. Alright, now United Battlefront is kind of their finisher, since it can find removal and synthesizer, and they found both. So that was a lucky hit. Exiles our Specialist. So that also could have exiled the Viper. So yeah, with how things are going, I don't think we necessarily had a chance. Can Viper just sacking the Percussionists. Opponent's got a million permanents they can sacrifice, so they don't necessarily have to discard or lose life. And the Synthesizer is very quickly gonna overpower a 6/6. So this is about as bad a matchup as you can get, I think, in the current metagame at least. Without Star Cage, the matchup could be a little bit more winnable, but they just have a relatively fast win condition that they can pretty reliably find thanks to the Battlefront. And then good answers to the Viper. Bit of life gain sprinkled in also doesn't hurt to fight the Specialist and Munitions plan. As they play another Snare, Viper down. Take at least 8. And yeah, this Viper is not going to get there by its lonesome. Alright, not much we could do. GG's. I assume our opponent can present lethal next turn. And they sack the bricks. They'll shrink down their tokens. But they're pretty likely to be able to make 3 more artifacts. Another Synthesizer is a good start. Second chump go to 1, but yeah, there's no top decks that would save me from that position. Anything else? Get to untap. And I can't even pay 2 life to take myself out of the game, since I don't have 2 life to pay to begin with. And Edge Rovers next. Alright, GG's. And that'll do it. On to the next one. Okay, we're on the draw with a keepable hand. Bauble gives us some removal. Start with a Rover. And then ideally sack a bunch of artifacts with Specialist in play when playing the Viper out. Opponent Esper, maybe Control or Mill. So can add Percussionist to the board. Still play Nutrient Block. Nowhere to Run takes out Rover. Still gives us a lander, so we still have a permanent for Viper. So next turn I could go Specialists plus Viper, but then I would have to sacrifice the Specialist itself, which may not be worth it. And Ghost Vacuum doesn't really stop us. So either way, attack for 1. And then I'll start with Specialists. Probably need to shock myself to keep my options open. This may get countered. And that resolves. So yeah, I could Viper, but against Esper, I don't have particularly high hopes for it sticking around. Next turn is also maybe their Day of Judgment turn. I would be sacking 4 artifacts, so this 8 damage. Yeah, you know what, let's just go for it. But if this gets countered, it's gonna feel pretty bad. Still get to draw a card and exile a card with the Percussionist dying. Find a Manufacturing, and Tough Cookie we can play next turn. Viper happens, they can also sack a Nowhere to Run to it, so not the most effective ability right now, but it can maybe add up if they don't find an answer. But then again, if they don't find an answer, they're taking 6. Opponents surprisingly sacked the Ghost Vacuum, keeping Nowhere to Run. So maybe they have a way to pick it back up. Ooh, and looks like our opponent failed to find a basic, so maybe they don't have one in the deck. And they also maybe failed to find an answer to the Rottenmouth Viper, so that steals a quick win. But yeah, the lander tokens from a rover are just one more reason why you should have at least a couple basics in the deck you can find in case those opportunities present themselves. There's also additional reasons, of course, cards like Demolition Field, destroying a non-basic, giving you a basic land in return. Cards like Assassin's Trophy occasionally see play, and as you go into older formats, there's plenty more reasons to have those basics available. On to the next one. Okay, we're on the draw with a keepable hand. Can maybe deploy the Manufacturing before we play any of our rovers, and then I'm looking for a sacrifice outlet, either Zealot or Viper. Opponent's blue-black rats, alright, not an archetype you see very often. So yeah, deploy the Manufacturing while I can block the Looter anyway. And then we can start making munitions. Opponent discards Vane's Treachery, now a banner on the rat, so they must have drawn into it. Okay, so this turn, if we want to be mana efficient, Specialist plus Rover. And then next turn Offering with Specialist in play can also be more effective. Could have also sacked the munitions now with Offering to take out the Looter. But I'm okay if it hits us one more time. Alright, I guess now with another banner it's going to turn into a 3-3. So a bit harder to interact with. Looter discards Intimidation Campaign and another Specialist off the top. So that's also starting to add up. So yeah, can try Specialist, maybe attack first. Because their opponent is still keeping up 2 mana here. And then now if we Offering, sacking an artifact, we deal 4 damage. Opponent's gonna Bitter Triumph after all. Okay, so we got 1 extra damage in by attacking first. Can still deal 2 damage thanks to the Offering, otherwise we don't have a way to sack the munitions at the moment. But yeah, with double banner, I doubt we'll be able to take out an opposing creature. So we could also sack a lander to ramp a bit more, have more mana for next turn, which is reasonable. Possible they're more of a reanimator deck if they're also running Bitter Triumph and other discard outlets besides the looter. But no, looks more like a rat deck, maybe more mid-rangey in nature. Vren's a good one. So if a creature would die, exile it instead is relevant for some of our synergies. And then which color do we need? Doesn't matter too much. And there's a Viper, that's what we wanted. So play Rover. Now sacking the Rover with Vren in play is a little tricky. This happens at the beginning of each end step, including ours. So yeah, probably don't want to sack the Rovers. Although I can maybe take out Vren. Let's see, it's got Ward 2, so every munitions needs to pay 2 mana to target it, but I would be able to finish it off if a Rover attacks into it. And if they take it, that's 2 free damage. Their opponent does block. That's exiled. So I need to play Viper. Sacking Rover. 2, 3. And then probably just manufacturing, keep the specialist. And then target Vren twice. Unless we just have lethal here by burning them out. 4, that's 8, 10, 11, 12. So I guess we just have lethal here. But yeah, otherwise I would have been able to finish off Vren, pay the ward. So that was an alternate line we had available. Alright, so we get to see this Junt Artifact Sacrifice deck in action, and yeah, the deck can lead to some pretty exciting turns with the Specialist and the Manufacturing potentially burning the opponent out, even from 20 life, and the Rottenmouth Viper has also found an excellent home in this deck, but there's still a few kinks to work out. The mana base also not quite perfect yet, as we're still missing some of the shock lands, and we need to find the right balance between having enough artifacts, enough sacrifice outlets and other payoffs, and also having a little bit of interaction for opposing strategies. So it's not the easiest deck to figure out, but it feels like we're slowly getting there, and it can only improve as time goes on. So yeah, that's going to do it for today's gameplay. I want to thank you for watching, hope you enjoyed, and as always, have a nice day.